Hello and welcome. My name is Georg Hinkel, and in this short video, I would like to show you how to create your first SiLA 2 server using the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK. So for this, I already prepared a solution with an API that we would expose to SiLA 2 in this tutorial, which consists of an interface, which is a greeting service with the only method to say hello and returning a greeting for a given for the person with a given name. And there's of course also an implementation which basically just does a string interpolation. So not really a fancy functionality, but it's basically a placeholder for functionality you could expose to SiLA 2. So, and the question is, how do we expose this super sophisticated functionality as a SiLA 2 server? So the first step to do this is to actually create a new project. We'll do a console application, which basically is the server application using .NET Core 3.1. In that case, yeah, and then we are basically fine. We can also change the namespace here. Yeah, and then the next step is of course, okay, now we need to include the SDK. So what the SDK basically does, it uses dependency injection to find the implementation and connect that with a so-called feature provider that basically is the code that determines how this functionality is exposed to SiLA 2, and this code is generated. So the first thing that we need to do now is to mark the interface that is going to be exposed. For this, we add a new project reference to the SiLA 2 annotations. Here they are. Install. And what this annotations package gives us is an attribute basically that says SiLA feature. And this attribute is basically used to mark interfaces that are meant to be exposed through SiLA 2. And also there's a couple of other attributes. So what we could actually say is that you can actually put constraints on certain things, so on parameters and return values. So we could, for example, say that this name here should only be have a maximum length of 20 characters. So this is how you basically use those annotations. There's a couple of annotations for ranges of integers and yeah, all the constraints that the SiLA 2 standard provides. So also Miami types and units and all this kind of stuff. You basically apply them all through just applying this attribute to the parameter or to the return value. So I can also put attribute on the return value. Basically this greeting will be a maximum 50 characters. Okay, next thing is we need to, very important, we need to compile the contracts project. The reason for that is that the code generator that is included in the SiLA 2 SDK only works on compiled assemblies. And for that, we need a compiled assembly, and we do that by compiling the assembly. Yeah, okay, fine. Next thing is we actually need the actual SDK. So the contracts, the annotations that I've given you earlier, this basically only gives this SiLA 2.annotations DLL, which is a assembly that only consists of attributes, so there's no code in there. But the actual SDK is, so it's also very lightweight and not really much of a problem to include into a contracts assembly that otherwise only consists of interfaces and data transfer objects if you want to. So for the server, this thing is going to be the one project that knows that we want to expose this contract to SiLA 2. So here we download a different package, namely the Tecan SiLA 2 server package. This comes with a couple of dependencies because yeah, you see here we've got the actual core SDK, the server package, the gRPC package, and they have other dependencies like Protobuf, like a system component model composition that is math, then the logging contracts, the annotations that we said earlier, and the a couple of contracts. Yeah, and what we use this for is to basically say that we can have the code generator, and the code generator integrates into the package manager console. So basically, it is a tool that is deployed together with the tecan.sila2 NuGet package, which we installed now. But it basically this tool basically integrates itself into the package manager console, so we can actually execute it from here, calling just SiLA-gen. Now, what this does is basically it told me here that I didn't select the verb, so I was using that wrongly, and then it basically tells me, okay, what are the possible verbs that I can use to execute this this tool. So there's a verb to generate certificates, a topic that I will address in a later video. There is verbs to generate clients, to generate features, to generate providers, to generate interfaces from a given feature. And there's an all-in-one solution to generate complete server code. We are going to use that. So let's first explore the parameters. So there's a help command, and I can use that to actually show me the options for a given command, in that case, generate server. So as you can see here, there's a couple of options that you can do. You can override you can specify the interface in case you don't have a marker, the SiLA feature marker on the interface. You can specify the category, the originator, the version, the path where the feature should be stored, additional namespaces, and so on and so forth. And there's two things that are required. One is the path to the assembly that should be scanned for interfaces, and the other one is the path to the C# project, which to which the generator provider should be added. So path to the assembly is in the contracts. We have the bin folder, and in the bin folder we have debug, net standard contract. .contracts.dll. Then the path to the server project, which is this one here. And lastly, we can actually do additional options. In this case, what is typically useful is to specify the namespace. And the namespace will be hello SiLA2.server. And if we do that, you see that we basically get, unfortunately, in red, but yeah, we get some log messages like that. There's data transfer objects generated for us, a server code generated for us, a feature provider generated for us, and so on and so forth. And if we look into the code here, there's two files that have been generated. One is this greeting service. So a feature that has been constructed from the interface. And there's a folder that contains actually two files. One is data transfer objects to be used, basically a yeah. And we I forgot we also need, of course, we need to add the project references. Otherwise, this thing will not compile. And here we basically have that it's data transfer objects to describe how the request object of a say hello command is going to be serialized and how the response is going to be serialized. And then there is this so-called feature provider, which basically specifies, okay, given an implementation of the iGreeting service, how do you actually expose that to SiLA 2? So there is going to be an unobservable command with those parameters here, and yeah, and then what you do is if you execute this command, you actually execute the inner command and do some error handling in case there was something wrong. Yeah. Then you notice that there is documentation here, but the generated feature doesn't have any documentation. Wouldn't it be useful to pick up the documentation? And the answer is yes, of course. The only problem that we have now is that the documentation is, is the documentation even generated? Check. So number one is do generate the XML documentation. Otherwise, it's not possible to read the documentation because it's just not there. So then we recompile to get the documentation actually generated for us. Yeah, that succeeded. And then the other problem is this documentation file, they have to be in the same folder. So wait. Generated that now into let's make sure that it's going to be, so the XML file always needs to be inside the same folder. Yeah, so and then let's regenerate. And here you can see that the documentation for this assembly has been loaded successfully. And the result is that now we have also descriptions on the feature. Now you notice that if you look into the into the feature on the top things, you have a feature version 1.0. That is because the assembly version of the contracts is 1.0. And we have the originator, hello SiLA, and category contracts. Those are basically derived from the namespace. So because this is hello SiLA2.contracts. If you want to, and I would strongly recommend you to override this using specific options to the generate server command. And because this generate server command can be quite longish, it is also, I would also recommend you to create some sort of batch file or put that into some after build post processing step or something of the contracts package to always regenerate the feature and the commands. Yeah, because it's basically super useful. In this case, in the scope of this demo, I will always just re-execute this line here. But for you, I would strongly recommend to create some sort of batch file. Yeah, and then we are almost done. The only thing is we actually need to start the server. So currently our program just prints hello world to the console. And for this, the SDK basically contains an all-in-one solution for servers that is called the Bootstrapper. And we just use it to start the server. And now, then we started the server, and now basically the application would finish afterwards immediately, which is not what we want. What we want is actually that to keep the server alive. And for this, we typically use a console read line, which means if you press enter, then you shut down the server. But as long as you don't do that, the servers will be running. Okay. There's one little thing remaining, and that little thing is currently this greeting service is just not referenced, so the server would not be able to find it. Now, as you can see here, the Tecan SiLA 2 SDK basically uses math to construct the objects. So what we need is to actually also add a reference here to system component model composition. We can also use the 4.5, I think, that is installed in the other projects. Yep, there. And then you can more or less copy those two lines here. And of course, we are exporting in iGreeting service. So maybe we can also make this a bit more beautiful. Yeah. So this basically says, okay, if you scan this library here, then this class is noted as an export of type iGreeting service, and you should only create one instance for it, regardless whoever asks. I mean, this is not so much important for this implementation here, because it actually doesn't matter whether you have one instance or multiple of them. But for other cases, this is more useful. Yeah. And then it's time to actually run the application. So I'll set that up as a start project and run. Okay. Sorry, I was not aware of this. So in that case, we will actually need also the other packages. So we will also need the contracts 3.2.1 and SiLA 2 3.2.1. And the gRPC 3.2.1 would also be useful. Okay. Let's rerun the server now. Yeah, now we see actually one exception that basically I forgot to mention is this feature provider that is generated. It will basically load the actual feature from an assembly embedded resource. And what we didn't do, which I forgot, was to actually embed the feature definition as an embedded resource. So let's do that now. So basically we go to the greeting service in the Solution Explorer and then click on embedded resource. And then we restart the server. So now what is that? So by default, the server logs to the console. You can change that if you want to. I will show that in a later video. And here it says, okay, and that you didn't provide any certificates, and therefore the server will start with plain text communication. That is a warning. So you basically have to provide some certificates, and otherwise the server is not using encryption as defined in the standard. But for now, we'll for the rest of this video, we'll use the plain text communication thing, and I'll show you in a later video how to add certificates. Then it basically shows you, okay, those are the addresses on which the server is accepting responses or incoming requests. And then it basically says, okay, we have three features here. One is the greeting service that we generated. One is the SiLA service, so the discovery service. This feature is actually mandatory. And because we're using the SDK 3.2, this SDK basically comes with server-initiated connections by default. So our server actually does implement server-initiated connections as well. I'm going to into details for in a later video, in a separate video. But this is basically the fact that this is a SiLA 2.1 server. And basically then we have some logs that the server has been started. It started a multicast service for discovery, and basically here let's see which on which network interfaces it's advertising the service using discovery. So on the Wi-Fi that I'm currently on the loopback, and on this virtual Ethernet. On those network interfaces, the discovery is actually supported. And we have here a world UID that is used to announce the server. Now, of course, you could say you don't trust me, and therefore I'll show you that also in the SiLA browser. Actually forgot to start it up, so give me a second. It's still starting. There's the SiLA browser, and if we scan the network, there's the server. So the server name is by default just the name of the executable, in which case it's server. I mean, we can actually change the name, but yeah. The server type is also basically just the assembly title of the entry point. So you can just change that by changing your details actually. Why did the connection? So there's this you basically in the logs you can see that the server has been called. Now it's back again for some reason. And we basically have the UID, we have the description, which I didn't provide because you basically have to put that also in the in the assembly info, basically. Okay. Yeah. But in principle, I mean, the server is still running, so I have no idea why the okay. This is still logs from the SiLA browser. I have no idea why the this connection is flickering, but yeah, this is basically, and we can actually execute this say hello command now, and we basically get the response hello demo. Yeah. So thanks for listening, and this was it for this first video on how to create a server.